Happy Sabbath, and welcome to our Sabbath School Bible study. As you know, this quarter we're studying from the book of Genesis. And today we're going to continue to study the life of Jacob, how Jacob became Israel, the father of a great nation. So today is a continuation of last week. And before we go into our lesson, let us bow our heads for prayer. Our most gracious Heavenly Father, we are very thankful that you have given us your holy Sabbath day, that we can gather together to worship you, to rest from our worries and our chores, and to study your word. Thank you for bringing all of us safely here today. May you be with us, give us understanding and wisdom, and may you bless all who hear your word today. We pray all this in your holy name. Amen. Last week we studied how Jacob stole Esau's birthright and has to run away. And why did Jacob run away? Why did he run away after he stole the birthright? Anybody have any idea why he had to run away?
The brother wanted to kill him.
Pardon?
His brother wanted to kill him.
That's it. Because in Genesis 27:42, Esau told him that after the mourning of our father, after our father died, I am going to kill you. This exactly was you're right. So Esau ran away to Padan Aram, which is in Mesopotamia. So let's look at the map, see where he has to go. Where's the light arrow? Where's the arrow? Thank you. Thank you. So if you look at this rectangular place, our story is centered on that place, which today actually is the West Bank and west of the Dead Sea. You get the Dead Sea here, west of the Dead Sea, and Shechem and Bethel is in the West Bank. And our story about the wrestling with God at the river is here, just north of Shechem. There's a river here. So if you look at the blue line, that's where Jacob has to go. From Hebron, which is his home, all the way to Padan Aram, which is in Mesopotamia. To me, it's about 500 miles. If you travel about 10 miles a day, it takes about 50 days. So that's the blue line he has to go, run away from Hebron to Padan Aram in Mesopotamia. And if you look at that blue line, actually it's a reverse of the red line. The red line is the path of Abraham when he went to Canaan, when God asked him. So he is actually tracing where he has a little detour here, but he's tracing the path of Abraham, the red lines. So he's going to go from Hebron to Padan Aram. So that's the, and most of our story today is in the West Bank here and west of this. So we know that he went to his uncle's place and he has to work for 14 years for two wives, right? So we now fast forward to Genesis chapter 30. Tells us that Jacob now have 10 sons and 1 daughter. He has 6 sons with Leah, the first wife, 2 sons with Leah's servant, 2 sons with Rachel's servant. So 6, 2, 2 is 10 sons. And then finally God opened the womb of Rachel, and Rachel had Joseph, Jacob's 11th son. And our story starts with Jacob going to Laban and says, it's time for me to go home. I've been here for 14 years. It's time for me to go home. And what does Laban say to Jacob? That while you are here, I have prospered. So Laban asked Jacob to stay a little longer and promised him that if you stay, all the sheep that are born speckled or spotted or black, you will have it. You will have all in the future, all the spotted and speckled sheep and goat, you will have it. Stay for a little while. So what did Jacob do? Jacob stayed for a little while. And the story says, as you know, Jacob is a manipulator. He's a supplanter. Supplanter is someone taking the position of someone else. What did he do? What did Jacob do? I read to you verse 37 of Genesis 30. Jacob fed the animals special diet, green branches of poplar, hazel, brown chestnut tree, and he got many, many spotted and speckled animals. And he made them, and he got more. And he also, very shrewd, he made them with Laban's non-speckled. He produced even more. So he became very wealthy. So this is, by this time, is 20 years already. So let's read a little bit about this story, 20. Okay, let's read that. Say, thus I have been 20 years in thy house. Jacob is saying, I served thee 14 years for thy 2 daughters, 6 years for thy cattle, and thou hast changed my wages 10 times. You see, Laban was not a very honorable employer, right? Except the God of my father, the God of Abraham, and the fear of Isaac had been with me. Surely thou had sent me away empty. You know, he was not treated, he would have gone home empty. So God has seen my affliction and labor of my hands and rebuked thee. So God noticed the injustice and blessed Jacob. And we are told now, we go to Genesis 31, that Laban's children, 2 sons, were very jealous that Jacob got very rich. And they complained to the father, and the father's countenance was not friendly anymore. So what did God say to Jacob? Jacob is in a difficult position now. So what did God say to Jacob? God says, return unto the land of thy father, and I will be with thee. So our lesson, this is our lesson today. That was my introduction. Jacob is now going home back to Hebron, right, 500 miles away. And now we know that Jacob is a wealthy man, and he has wives, he has children, but he faced new problems. What is his problem that he's going to face? He has to face his brother who was trying to kill him. And that is our Sunday lesson. So let us go to Sunday's lesson. So Sunday lesson tells us that Jacob sent messengers to Esau and command his messengers, his servant, to call Esau Lord, Lord, and ask for forgiveness. And then what did Jacob do? He divided his people into 2 camps. Why? He says that if Esau attacked them, one of the camp may escape. He's already being very practical. He divided them. And then in verse 6 of chapter 32, the messenger returned and told Jacob, your brother is coming with 400 men. Now, if you are Jacob, what would you do? I mean, you will pray to God, right? But what else would you do if you are Jacob? Your brother is coming with you 400 men. So the lesson says that he sent 200 female goat, 200 female sheep, 20 male goat, 20 sheep, and a lot of camels. He sent a present. and he was very distressed. He sent present to appease. And then he prayed to God. Now Jacob knew that he had offended God. So my question is, how had Jacob offended God? He knew he has offended God. How had Jacob offended God? Anyone? Well, the lesson tells us that he offended God by taking matters into his own hands, obtaining the birthright by his own effort. He was actually behaving like Abraham. Abraham took Hagar as a wife and tried to achieve God's promise by their own effort. So he was actually by a river called Jabbok, which is near Shechem, a horizontal river actually flowing into Jordan. And while he was praying, he was attacked by a man. And in verse 24, he says, the wrestling lasted until the break of day. And in verse 30, identify the man as God, Christ. So he was wrestling with Christ. And I think he realized that he was wrestling with a divine person. So he would not let this person go until this person bless him. So for this person, Christ to get away, Christ has to touch the socket of his hip to produce a dislocation. So let's read this story. So this is talking about when he saw, he means Christ, saw that he could not prevail, he touched the hollow of his thigh, the hollow of Jacob's thigh was out of joint, and as he wrestled with him. Now, I want to bring you all to a little discussion of this situation. Right? You know that this is a very unusual situation. Right? You know, God answering someone's prayer by coming down and wrestling with him. God never did that before. God came down to talk to Abraham in the tent. God could have sent an angel. God could have given him a dream or just answer his prayer. Now my question for discussion is, what is the significance of God coming down to wrestle with Jacob? Why? Why is God so personal? Actually, I asked myself this question, and I got the answer from the lesson, but I want to invite you all to think about. Actually, Jacob is a very fortunate person, right? God came down in a very personal way and wrestled with him. Anybody has any reason why God did that? Thank you. Okay.
I think whatever God does is always pointing towards something. I know in this lesson, it talked about not only in Jacob's time, you know, during Jacob's situation, he had to wrestle with God. I know Bible have a lot of situation where, like Abraham's sacrifice of Isaac, it point towards a future event. And Jacob wrestling with God, pointing also to a future event. You know, Ellen White said the Jacob's trouble. I think it can also demonstrate it to us there's spiritual struggle, you know, within us.
You actually answered my question, because you know, the lesson actually referred to this wrestling with God as Jacob's distress of meeting his brother as Jacob's trouble. And we are told that in prophecy, Daniel and Jesus refer to Jacob's trouble in prophecy. You know, in prophecy, what is Jacob's trouble? Jacob's trouble is actually, like Shirley is saying, it's an expression referred to the persecution and oppression and trial of believers before Jesus comes. You know, you and I are going to go trial and oppression and persecution just before Jesus comes. You know, we study about the mark of the beast coming out of Babylon, and then we study about the 7 plagues, and we study of persecution. So this is what this wrestling of Jacob's trouble point to. So let's read Daniel's prophecy. What did Daniel say? And at the time shall Michael stand up. This is the time of Jacob's trouble, right? Michael is someone who is like Christ. The great prince will stand for the children of the people. And there shall be a time of trouble. This is Jacob's trouble. It's never since was a nation. That means this trouble is so bad that never before happened in any nation. It's and it's a great time of distress. And the thing that is positive here is that thy people shall be delivered, every one that was found written in the book. So that is the assurance that we have here. So it's a time of distress. Let's read what Jesus talks about. What is Jesus said here? They shall deliver you up to be afflicted. They shall kill you, and they shall be hated. And ye shall be hated for all nations for my sake. And then many shall be offended, shall betray one another, shall hate one another. And Jesus said, except that those days be shortened, no flesh be saved. It's so terrible that God shortened the day. Otherwise, none of us is going to survive. So during this time, we will have, during this time of Jacob's trouble, we are reminded that we will have a lot of struggle. Why do we struggle during this time? Why during Jacob's trouble? Because we have doubts and fear of our faith and our deliverance. So we all struggle mentally and physically during this time. And let's read what Mrs. White says. Mrs. White says, as the patriarch, Joseph wrestled all night for deliverance from the hand of Esau. So the religious, hopefully the remnant, will cry to God day and night from deliverance from the enemies that surround them. So what is the lesson? What is a spiritual lesson about Jacob's wrestling? Anyone? Referring to this time of persecution, what is the lesson for us? The lesson says that Jacob's wrestling with God is to teach Jacob and all of us to be tenacious and hold on to our faith and not let go until God has blessed us. It is to teach us to be dependent on God. So this is actually the spiritual lesson for Jacob and for all of us, that we should, as we wrestle with God, we should not let go. We shall not lose our faith and our trust during the time of trouble. So anyone wants to comment on this? Yes, sure.
Thank you. Thanks for emphasizing the importance of faith. Oftentimes when we think about the time of trouble, we think about those who are our physical enemies, those who are persecuting us, and our fixation is upon that physical and personal enemies. But if you think of, if we focus on, and the last part of your sentence here on the screen, deliverance from the enemies that surround them. Really, what is the enemy that surrounds us? And I would emphasize that it is the lack of our faith. that we don't have the faith of Jesus adequately, and we don't accept God's offer of his help to develop and increase our faith. We fixate on persecution. We don't pay enough attention to faith that's important for us.
I think we ourselves can be our greatest enemy if we lose faith and we doubt. And during this time, I think, yes. I have one last question before we go to the next day's lesson. Why did God not prevail over Jacob? You know, God is overpowering and God is almighty. Why God did not prevail until God has to dislodge his socket? But Jacob was so tenacious, but God could have easily powered him. Why God did not prevail? Is God trying to teach him a lesson? That's the question. I have, and I found an answer, but I'd like to hear your answer. Any? The lesson seemed to say that God is a God of love, and God is not always overpowering and dominating, you know. And that God answers Jacob's prayer by a touch. And this touch is at the loin, signifies procreation. That God is going to remember his promise that he will be a father of a great nation. That's what I got from the lesson. And the second thing is in just touching Jacob without hurting him or maiming him. God is telling Jacob that during the time of trouble, life is sacred. God values our life, and that we should have assurance that God values all lives. And this is the explanation I got from the lesson. It's not from me, but anyone has any comments? So after this incident, God changed Jacob's name from Jacob, the supplanter, to Israel. Israel means God fights. Now the lesson comes up with another question. So isn't this statement a paradox? It's a contradictory statement because it is Jacob who fights, but now God calls him God fights. Why? Jacob's name is God fights. And the lesson says it's because when you struggle with God and you have prevailed, because of your tenaciousness and your faith, God will always fight for you. So Jacob wants to be reminded that God will always fight for him. So Jacob named that place Peniel, which means he has seen the face of God. Any comments before I go to Monday's lesson, where Jacob is going to meet his brother? Let's go to Genesis chapter 33. When Jacob saw Esau in the distance, what did he do? He divided his family again. He put all his servants and the children in front, and his family at the back. It's very logical. And then he went ahead of all of them to meet his brother. And when he met his brother, what did he do? He bowed 7 times and addressed him as my Lord, my Lord. What does this 7-time gesture of Jacob to his brother, bow, what does that signify? Anybody? What does the 7?
According to the lesson, he is taking back the 7 blessings that his father gave him, the birthright blessing. As if he said it, giving it back to you.
You study your lesson. Yeah. Genesis 27:27 says that when Isaac gave Jacob the birthright, Isaac gave him 7 blessings, which includes nations bowing down to you, abundant harvest, having many servants, etc., etc. So Jacob, in bowing to his brother, is paying his debt to his brother that he has stolen. He's returning the debt. Okay, Ivan?
You know, this is the story of one of the patriarchs. And it's a story of faith also, and a story of lack of faith. We read earlier, and you had on the screen there, that God instructs Jacob to return to the land of his fathers, of Abraham and Isaac, right? And it says that God would be with him, be with Jacob. But even after he wrestles with the angel, with Christ, it seems to me that Jacob still is expressing a lack of faith. Because, you know, what you put up on the screen and what you talked about is very true. You know, the 7 bowing downs. But even before that, as you read the story, he sends his servants with a whole bunch of donkeys, and then another bunch of servants with a whole bunch of camels as gifts to Esau to try to, you know, to make it feel better so that he would be accepted. In a way, can we look at this, and he divides his family into half, right? But God said, go back to your homeland, and I will be with you. But Jacob's dividing them, sending all these gifts in advance. Isn't that kind of a sign of lack of faith? God said go, but he's still doing his stuff.
I think Jacob is human.
We do our stuff.
I think Jacob, that's why we study the Bible, to learn how to have faith, to learn how to.
Do you think this is a lack of faith that he gave this presents to his, brother, and also preparing in 3 groups? Or is he doing humanly possible, to prepare, the situation? So sometimes if we just say, I sit here and just wait for God to provide, isn't it kind of presumptuous as well? So how do you differentiate having faith, not preparing, and preparing, and also at the same time, waiting for God to work things out? I don't know. I'm just asking.
I think you have a very good point here, because it leads to the next part of the lesson here. Because what Jacob did is what you and I all have to do. Let me tell you why. After bowing to, King Seng wants to speak, sure.
It could be a sign of not a faith, but it could be a sign of repentance.
Yeah. I think you have a point. I will come to that real soon. Okay. So what happened when Esau saw Jacob? Esau came and kissed him and forgave him, and also accepted his presence. And then what did Jacob say? Jacob says, when I see your face, I see the face of God. So Jacob understands that forgiveness comes from God. And when he saw the gesture of Esau, he saw the face of God. So the lesson actually comes to the reason why Jacob has to make amends with his brother. What Shirley and the lesson tells us that reconciling with God includes reconciling with your brother. To remember that his love for God and his love for his brother is dependent on each other. You cannot have reconciliation with God without reconciliation with your brother. Have you noticed, they said that people who are very religious and very pious, but are not friendly or loving to their brothers? We see that all the time. So the lesson says reconciling with God is dependent on you and I reconciling with our brothers first. So I think that answers your question. It's more than faith. It's actually a commandment of God. And Jesus told us in Matthew 22 says that the first and the greatest law to love God with all your heart. And the second is to love your neighbor as yourself, love your brother as yourself. So I think the lesson here is that we have to reconcile with man as well as with God, and not just reconcile with God. Any comments? Very fast, we go to Tuesday's lesson. It's the violation of dinner. So after departing from Esau amicably, he went to Succoth, we saw in that rectangular, and then he went to Shechem. He traveled south on the way to Hebron, right? He bought some land and he built an altar to worship God. What happened in Shechem? Genesis 34 says his daughter Dinah went to the city to make friends with some girls, and she was kidnapped by Shechem. Shechem is the name of the crown prince, whom the city was named. So he was kidnapped by Shechem. And he took her and he raped her. And then in verse 4, chapter 34, Shechem told his father Hamor that he wanted to marry Dinah. So they went to Jacob for permission. Jacob was upset, but he waited for his sons to come back. And when his sons returned, his son says, "We cannot let our sister marry someone who is not circumcised." And he insists that Shechem and his father talk to the city elders and ask everyone to be circumcised. So they all agreed that every male was circumcised. What happened on the third day? When they were all too sore, this is in verse 25 of chapter 34, when they were too sore to move, Simon and Levi, the second and the third son, quietly entered the city, took their sword, and killed every man in sight, including Hamor and his son Shechem, and took Dinah home. They killed everyone. And in verse 29, Jacob's other son went into the city, plundered, took the person's sheep and cattle and their wives and make them their servants. So you can see that this is a very, very violent situation perpetrated by Jacob's son. What is the moral of this story? Anyone? Jacob was really upset, told his children that they now would not have any more peace. We are now very vulnerable. But the lesson actually do not explain too much this violent situation. So my question is, what is the moral of this story, of this violent action by Jacob's children going into the city and killing every male and taking all their wives and their possession? What is the moral? Anyone? Why is this story in there even? I think the lesson did give a little reason. He says the reason they did not just only kill Shechem and his father is because they were afraid that if they do not kill all the men, they will take revenge. So this is a preemption to save their family. They kill every man first before they kill the father, so that they will not take revenge. And the second reason is the action of rape is a violent act, and that if the sister married this man, who knows what will happen to her in the future. And the third reason they give is that God may have allowed this killing because they were obeying God's commandment of not intermarrying the Canaanites. So I leave it to you all to draw your own conclusion of why this story was put in there, this great violent story. Now we go to what Jacob said to the children. After the murder, what Jacob said to them: "Ye have troubled me to make me stink." Stink means undesirable, unwelcome among the inhabitants, among the Canaanites. and the parasites. And I, being few in number, they shall gather themselves together against me. They may slay me. I shall be destroyed, I and my house. So now Jacob is lamenting that there's no more peace. No more peace. We might all get killed, and you make us, you set a very bad example for us, right? And you notice that this whole story of Genesis 34, God was very quiet. God did not say a word. Same as Genesis 16, when Abraham took Hagar as a wife, God was quiet. And I noticed that God, in certain times, was very quiet when his people do evil things. And I learned that in this sort of situation, God actually is a very loving, and he allows you to make decisions and to learn from your I don't know, you may have another opinion. God was very quiet the whole episode. He didn't say anything. Anybody has any comment of why God was very quiet during this violent episode, during Abraham, time when Abraham took Hagar as his wife? So finally, God intervened to find a solution for Jacob, to give him some peace. So God told Jacob, leave Shechem and go to Bethel. What is in Bethel? Bethel is a place where God first gave Jacob a dream of a ladder leading to heaven with angels, reassuring that God is still with him, remember? So God says, go to Bethel, and I'll give you some peace. And we know that in Israel, Bethel is also called Luz, L-U-Z. So before God says, you go to Bethel and I will renew my covenant, God says, I want you to do something. So the lesson here teaches us that before you and I reconcile with God, what must we do? You know, all of us want to reconcile with God. Says, before you and I reconcile with God, what should we do? We must give up our idols. We may give up our money, our fame, our love for the world. We have to give up our idols. And Jacob had idols he plundered from the Canaanites when they left Shechem. And Jacob's wife, Rachel, also took idols from his father's house. So God asked them to give up all your idols. And they did. And then they went to Bethel, and they found some peace and some so here tells us that Jacob came to Luz, which is Bethel, which is in the land of Canaan. There is Bethel, and he and all the people that were with him, and he built there an altar and called the place El Bethel, because there God appeared unto him when he fled from the face of his brother. So you notice that here God brought Jacob full cycle. And now God gave Jacob peace. And he called the place El Bethel. Now this is something is interesting, because why did Jacob change the name from Bethel to El Bethel? El means God. Bethel means the house of God. Indicating that he's now with God at the house of God, emphasizing the presence of God rather than the place. So we are taught in this lesson here that it is more important, you and I, not just to come to the house of God, but to experience the presence of God. You know, coming to the house of God is not enough. Knowing God is not enough. You have to experience the presence of God. And that's what the lesson is trying to teach. Do you have the presence of God? Remember Cain was upset when God sent him away. And what was his complaint? I have been sent away from your presence. So the presence of God is very important, more than anything. Now let's very quick come to the last part of the lesson. From there, he continued his journey south to Hebron. He went to Ephrathah, which is Bethlehem. And here we found that Rachel was having difficult labor, and she died during childbirth. And she gave birth to Benjamin. She was going to call him Benoni, means son of my sorrow. But Jacob changed it to son of my right hand, Benjamin. And we have an added story here that Reuben, the eldest son, raped one of Jacob's concubines. He did terrible things at the end of this story. We don't know why he did it. Maybe it's lust. Maybe it's he was trying to gain control. And our lesson ends with the legacy of Benjamin and Reuben. Benjamin actually became one of the last two tribes in the south that give rise to the Jewish nation, Judah and Benjamin. Reuben belongs to the north, which eventually got conquered and disappeared from the Old Testament. So here you can see the legacy of Benjamin, and Benjamin has a lot of in the book of Kings, Judges, the book of Judges. Benjamin has a lot of ancestors which are judges, and King Saul is a descendant of Benjamin. So here they contrast the life of Benjamin, the legacy of Benjamin, with the legacy of Reuben. I cannot say any more about the rape because I did not say too much about why he raped his father's concubine. So what is the lesson of Jacob today? This is my last question. What lesson can we learn from Jacob today? The lesson teaches us that God's will and his promise will always be fulfilled, in spite of human weakness or human error. If God's people cooperated and obey God, there will be less suffering, less delay. Things will be more smooth. But no matter how messed up God's family is, God's promise never fails. So that is our lesson today, that you and I should look at God's promise and know that God's promise will always come, will always be fulfilled, no matter how we behave or how the problems that we create. God will always fulfill his promise. I thank you all for listening. Anyone has any comment?
Reuben, he lost his birthright when he did the rape his father's concubine. In the Bible, he lost his birthright.
Reuben?
Yeah.
Reuben lost his first birthright because of the rape, yes. And the interesting thing is that it's supposed to go to the second son, but he gave it to his 11th son because Joseph is the first son of the wife he loved. And that created all the problems.
His father wanted to punish him toward the very end before he died. So that's the way I look at it. He lost everything. His father didn't bless him.
Yeah. And that created all the problem of Joseph, right? His brothers all hated him because he inherited the birthright instead of the second son. No.
Maybe that's the reason that he raped the concubine. Because if you look at the story of David, Absalom had a relationship with David's concubine because that means that he wants to take the throne. He wants to take over. So perhaps in this sense that Reuben wants to take over from Jacob
Right.
instead of
Right. It's a way of trying to exit his
the oldest.
yes. Yeah. Thank you very much.